Let me ask you guys something. What do you think happens when the smartest thing on earth isn't even human anymore? Today I want to talk about AI IQ and how fast it's growing and what that growth actually means and why some people think we might be heading towards something called ASI, which is short for artificial superintelligence. First, let's clear something up, right? It's a big misconception. AI doesn't actually have an IQ score like humans do, right? There's no little test that fills that out. When people talk about AI IQ, what they're really talking about is capability. How well can it reason? How well can it solve new problems? Can it explain itself? Can it transfer knowledge from one domain to another? Let's go back 10 years, right? AI was pretty narrow. It could recognize images, filter spam, maybe even beat you at chess, right? Today, right now, AI can write essays, generate code, pass professional exams, summarize research papers, right? That's a very huge jump in a very short amount of time. And the important thing isn't the number, it's the trajectory, it's the rate at which it's growing. All right, let's go back to 2010, right? 16 years ago. AI systems were these specialized tools that were very, very good at one thing, but very, very bad at everything else. Then around 2016 to 2018, that's when deep learning exploded, right? Systems like AlphaGo showed that AI could handle strategic planning in ways that we couldn't even imagine. Then around 2020, especially 2022, that's when something shifted, right? These LLMs, these large language models, started showing something called emergent abilities. Now, what are emergent abilities? Basically, when you make these models big enough, new capabilities just appear, right? They weren't directly programmed, they emerged from scale. So you might be asking, what's driving that growth, right? There's a couple things, right? More computing power, more data, better architectures. But here's the part that actually matters. This hasn't been linear growth, right? It looks exponential, and exponential growth is deceptive. It feels slow until it suddenly isn't. All right, let's actually take a look at this chart for a second here before we continue. And first off, I do want to explain something important, right? These numbers are not IQ scores because AI does not take clinical IQ tests, and there's no official psychological scale for machines. So I do want to clarify that. You can't measure AI's capability or intelligence using IQ. And I know that I've been using that term throughout this video, but I just want to clarify that now that we're looking at the charts. See, this chart isn't based on a formal intelligence scale. It's just a simplified visualization of benchmark performance trends compared to average human performance. All right, it's just a proxy scale that I'm going to be using to illustrate this trajectory. So let's actually dive in, right? Back in 2020, I'm going to put it at around a 0.5 RCP, right? Most AI systems were strong at these narrow tasks. Image recognition, good. Pattern detection, good. General reasoning across domains, not really. If we compare overall reasoning ability to an average human, it was probably around half as capable across these, general tasks. It could do specific things really well, without doubt, but it couldn't flexibly transfer this knowledge. 2022, I'm putting it at around 0.7 RCP, right? By 2022, these large language models, these LLMs, start showing broader reasoning skills, right? They could write coherent essays, explain concepts, solve some logic problems, basic math, perform step-by-step reasoning. But it was still inconsistent. It was still fragile, but clearly a lot more general. So relative to an average human's cognitive flexibility, it was maybe around 70% equivalent on, these reasoning heavy tasks. Not smarter than people, but also no longer obviously inferior. Early 2024, I'm going to put it around 1.0 RCP, which again is just relative cognitive performance. And this is where things start getting interesting, right? By early 2024, these leading models were matching the average human on many standardized reasoning benchmarks. Not everything, But, in structured logic and coding tasks and verbal reasoning, they were competitive. And that's why I put this at around a 1.0 RCP. This doesn't mean that AI became human, right? It just means that on a lot of cognitive tasks, performance was roughly comparable to an average adult. And that's a huge milestone. Now, late 2024, right? I put it at around a 1.1 RCP. And this is task dependent. Remember that, okay? Remember, task dependent. Later in 2024, these improvements in architecture and training led to stronger reasoning performance, right? In certain domains, like math, coding, and structured logic, AI began outperforming most humans. We can all agree on that. But here's the key phrase. AI might outperform 90% of humans in math reasoning. And then they'll fail a simple common sense question. So instead of claiming genius level intelligence, it's a lot more accurate to say that overall performance creeped slightly above average human levels in these specific domains. So around 1.1 RCP on reasoning heavy tasks. Now we move on to early 2025. You gotta put it around 1.1 to 1.2 RCP. It's still uneven, right? By early 2025, this trend did continue, right? The performance improvements became more about refinement and better reasoning stability, right? Fewer logical breakdowns and stronger multi-step thinking. But here's what didn't happen. We didn't suddenly get some universally superhuman, stable general intelligence across every cognitive dimension. So instead of making these dramatic jumps to genius level IQ, right? The more realistic picture is gradual improvement above average human performance in structured domains. So that's why I show it leveling into the 1.1 to 1.2 range, not exploding vertically. So now let's look at the rate of growth, right? Here's what matters the most. Even if these numbers look small, 0.5 to 1.1, maybe 1.2, that's still more than doubling relative capability in about 5 years, right? That's extremely fast compared to biological evolution or even, most technological revolutions. And if that curve continues, that's where conversations about AGI and eventually ASI start becoming serious. Again, clarify that this chart isn't claiming AI has certified IQ, it's just illustrating a trajectory. And the trajectory is what's important, not whether it's 1.05 or 1.1, right? But that we crossed that threshold of human comparable reasoning at all. And that's historically significant. So now let's talk about AGI versus ASI. We mentioned ASI. What is ASI, right? Well, let's start off with AGI. What is AGI? AGI is artificial general intelligence, right? That's AI that can do economically useful cognitive tasks at a human level. But beyond AGI is something much, much bigger, which is ASI. ASI stands for artificial superintelligence, right? That's not human level. That's beyond human level. It's smarter than the best scientist. It's smarter than Einstein, right? It's a better strategist than the best general. It's better than Napoleon at what he would do best. It's more creative than the most initiative entrepreneur. I'll leave that one up to you guys. Now here is where it gets wild to me. If AI becomes better than humans at AI research, it can start improving itself. And that's called recursive self-improvement, right? Smarter AI designs even smarter AI. And that loop can accelerate it really, really fast. And that's what people mean by an intelligence explosion. If you ever hear that term, that's what they're talking about. So whether you think that's 10 years away or 50 years away or even 5 years away, the concept itself changes how we think about the future. Oh, but Daniel, we've always had these revolutions before, We've had the steam engine multiplied muscle, right? Electricity multiplied energy. The internet multiplied communication. But this is different. It's multiplying intelligence. And intelligence is the thing that creates everything else. That's why this feels different, right? We are potentially creating something that can outperform us at research, strategy, optimization, persuasion, decision making. That's not another tool. That's a new actor in this world. How about we talk about some risks now? Not fear, just actual reality, right? Let's talk about the concerns, right? The first one would be alignment, right? And what I mean by alignment is keeping it in check, right? How do you make sure that a system smarter than us actually shares our human values, right? It doesn't have to be evil to be dangerous, right? It just has to pursue the wrong goal really efficiently. Let me give you guys a very short example. Us humans, right? We kill these cows and these sheep to do what? To feed ourselves. That's not necessarily being evil, but it is 100% dangerous to the sheep and to the cows and to these other animals. To them, we're evil. To us, we're just pursuing a goal efficiently to be able to survive and sustain ourselves. That same thing could happen with AI. They could have some very specific goal that is very good for them. The second very big risk is a pretty obvious one that I feel like most people care about: power concentration, right? Let's say a few companies or governments could control these AI systems. That's a very, very massive imbalance of power. The third one is the one that we are actually experiencing as of right now. It's the economic shock, right? This isn't just factory jobs that are getting replaced by mechatronics. No, these are jobs in law. Coding is the pretty big one that everyone talks about. Finance, research, media, right? If this cognitive work gets automated, society might struggle to adapt. And we saw this happen very recently, where Amazon cut over 30,000 corporate jobs, right? And we all know that that was driven by a shift towards AI. And for fourth risk, autonomy, right? As these AI systems get integrated into infrastructure, these markets, defense systems, right? This decision-making speed increases beyond human oversight. And that's where complexity becomes risk. All right, maybe it's not all bad, right? Let's look at the upside, because the upside is pretty insane. AI can accelerate medical breakthroughs. It can discover new materials. It could help solve even climate modeling problems, right? And if aligned properly, this AI could be the most powerful problem-solving tool that humanity has ever created. So maybe this isn't a doom story, it's a responsibility story. All right, let's close it off, right? Here's the real takeaway. The question isn't whether AI is getting smarter. I think we all know it is. We see that it is. The chart shows that it is. The stats shows that it is, right? The question is whether we guide that growth wisely. Will we be responsible? Will we align it? For the first time in history, we're building something that will eventually surpass us intellectually. And that's not some Silicon Valley tech innovation, right? It's not some tech story. That's a civilization level shift. It could be the most dangerous thing for us, or we could align it, be responsible, and it could be the biggest breakthrough in human history. And we're living through that right now. So what do you think? Is ASI far away? Or are we underestimating how fast this curve is rising? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.